Here we are. We are at New Orleans for the Indy Grand Prix of New Orleans. I'm Paul Page. Mark Janes is here in the booth. And down trackside is both Jake Query and Nick Yeoman. We're a few minutes away from them actually starting. They've cleaned the track up fairly well, surprise, considering how much rain was dumped on this track, but I think that's a good omen for the ability to clean this track. Let's find out, though, what a couple of folks are doing down pit side, and we're going to start with Nick Yeoman.
And you may hear some of the engines have been fired here on pit lane. The 67 of Joseph Newgarden, that car's fired up. A lot of the drivers have made their way out onto pit lane, though. We'll grab a quick word with Simona Di Silvestro. Simona, we got some heavy rain about a half hour ago. It's cleared out. What's your thoughts on this practice session? I mean, how dry do you think this racetrack realistically is?
Yeah, I think so. We'll see how many puddles there's left, but I think it should be okay, and hopefully it'll dry out so we can actually do some dry running towards the end of the session.
How'd the first practice session go for you this morning?
Well, so. It's first time I was here, so no testing. Learning the track in an hour was really busy, but hopefully what we learned from now, will be better this session. So really looking forward to go out there.
Had a big announcement earlier this week about you running the Indianapolis 500 for this Andretti Autosport team. I imagine you got to be awfully excited. Yeah,
definitely. Especially being with Andretti Autosport at the 500 special because they won it last year, and I'm really happy that T-Connectivity joined on board to give me the chance to run in the 500.
All right, have some fun this weekend.
Thank you.
That is Simona Di Silvestro, Jake Query.
Will Power is getting ready, I think, to get in his car. Let's talk real quick, Will. First off, my understanding now, practice will be open until 6:25, so just about an hour or so. It is wet, and I think it'll probably be wet over the course of this weekend. What do you look for now when you get ready to get out there in that one car?
Well, actually, unless it's half and half, so we can't run until it's completely slick or completely wet. So we'll probably sit and wait and see how dry it is, or maybe just do an out lap on dry tires to see how the track is.
You have 6 sets of wet tires as well. I would imagine figuring that out has to come into play here, does it not?
It does a lot. That's why if we had unlimited wets, we would run just to see. But we don't, and you need 4 sets to run the race. And you need a couple sets to run qualifying if it's wet, so can't do anything.
We'll check in with your teammate. We'll let you get your suit on here. Will Power getting set and getting ready. How about Simon Pagenaud, that Penske truck rental machine? Just talking to Will about preserving those wet tires, which comes into play. But I want to ask you about this track in general. What are the challenges from a driving standpoint, or what things do you like about it?
Well, it's a beautiful racetrack. They've done a fantastic job here at making this track to the standard of IndyCar, and I really enjoy it. I think it's the first year we're here, and obviously it takes time to get going for a track like this to get to a good level that they're at. So I enjoy it. I think it's fantastic flowing speeds. We're top 190 at the end of a straight. Great passing zones. It's going to be a great venue.
We had a torrential downpour just about 30 minutes ago or so in this area. It dramatically decreased the temperature, and the air is not as thick as it was earlier. How different does that let your race car feel when you're in there, when it's not as humid and it's a little bit cooler?
Like you said earlier, the problem is rain tires, quota. How much do you want to use tires now and not have it for qualifying, knowing the race is probably going to be wet? So, a lot could happen in a wet race, so you want to have as many sets as you want. Now you also need to know the track in the wet conditions. So we'll see. That's going to be a team decision.
Of course, you've also got 3 guys, teammates to talk to about it. So we'll let you get back to talking to those guys and looking over what you guys can find out.
Thanks, Jake.
All right, Simon Pagenaud. Nick?
Yeah, about 30 seconds from the green flag being shown here at NOLA Motorsports Park. I'm not exactly sure we're going to see a lot of cars out on racetrack immediately. There are some strapping into the race cars. Stefano Coletti is not one of them. How about that practice session this morning? I mean, it's a new track for everybody, but how did it go for you early on this day?
It went good. I mean, we had a lot of testing to do, and we tried a lot of stuff on the car, but in the end, when we put new tires, we were in the top 6. So the car is fast, and now we're just waiting to see if we can run on it.
How was that first IndyCar experience 2 weeks ago in St. Petersburg?
It was fun. I never expected the race to be that long with so many cautions, and the racing is actually really, really fun. So can't wait to race again this weekend.
What's the longest race you had done before that marathon that we had there in St. Pete?
An hour maximum, so it's completely different.
A plan for you to get in that car pretty soon here to go out, even though a wet racetrack?
Well, I hope so. The problem is right now the track is not wet enough and it's not dry enough, so we just have to wait, because if we put rain tires now, we're going to destroy them. So we'll just wait it for a bit and see if it's going to dry up.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
That is Stefano Coletti, the rookie for KVH Racing.
Well, with the green out, Nick Yeoman, the first car to take to the track, in fact, at this moment, no, there are 2 cars out there, but the first car was James Jakes. He apparently decided he wanted to get out and find out what was going on, as did Ryan Hunter-Reay, who, of course, is the defending Indy 500 champion. But that was an interesting argument on how far you have to go to be able to save tires, and you neither want it wet or you want it dry.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to hear the responses and the observations of the drivers because of the difficulty of the conditions. I mean, it speaks to the mindset of these practice sessions as a whole, Paul, even on a weekend where it's going to be nothing but bone dry. I mean, tire management is very, very, very important. It's as much a part of the race strategy as anything else, and all of these drivers are mindful of the impact that this course right now has on both the primary tires and the wets.
Keeping an eye on the circuit on James Jakes, who is generally looking for the dry portions of the course, though he can't always find them, and has decided that the pit road might be a better place for him right now. But he was sawing back and forth at the wheel quite a bit. Montoya and Ryan Hunter-Reay are both on the course. Montoya just has come out of the pits and has started to make his way around, not fully up to speed yet. And Ryan Hunter-Reay, of course, even though those people are out, we don't have an indication and won't for some time of what speeds we're talking about, though Ryan Hunter-Reay just flashed down the front stretch, kicking up water as he went through several puddles and heads down into turn 1. He makes that right-hand turn that brings him into 1. There was a big puddle here earlier. They got rid of it, which was pretty impressive because it seemed pretty deep. Went way wide coming off of 1. Swings back the left-hander that is 2 now. And now what they say is a very complex portion of the circuit that we need to keep an eye on, which is the 3-4 complex. He makes the turn right now that brings him into turn 3. That's a left-hander hairpin and then a short straight, and it'll bring him back to a right-hander, a fairly wide-open circuit, a little more wide open as a hairpin than the first one that they went into. So Ryan Hunter-Reay he's hitting a lot of water as he goes out there, but at the same time, I'm guessing, Mark, he's learning a whole lot of information.
6:25 is the time that this thing will receive the twin checkers. That is, of course, Central Time, 6:25 Central Time. Big learning curve at St. Petersburg a couple of weeks ago for the promising rookie Sage Karam, but Nick Yeoman, like he had a pretty good first session today.
I think he did. All the Ganassi cars showing some speed in this first session earlier today. Sage Karam, I think 7th quick, he ended up on the speed charts. I would assume got to be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it's a lot better than how St. Pete was for me, so definitely pleased with it. You know, the whole Ganassi team right now has got some speed. You know, we elected to come here and test it when everyone else went to Sebring, so I think that's helping out right now. But no, everyone will catch up. The series is so competitive. You know, I was 7th, but it's almost like 1/10 will put me straight in the top 3. So, you know, I ended up not being able to get a clean lap there on my new tire run at the end. So I know there's still speed left in the thing. So it would have been good to get that last run.
I think the last couple days have kind of been a travel day for a lot of us coming down here. But you spent some time in New York, I understand. What were you doing up there?
Yeah, just trying to promote the series, promote myself, and you know, get everything going again. So visited a few things, went to GQ, Sports Illustrated Kids, you know, a few other magazine guys, and you know, just trying to get the name of IndyCar back out there.
You gonna be at Long Beach?
I hope so. I think things are looking good. You know, we're all pretty optimistic with, you know, how things are looking. About, you know, we think things are looking good right now for half the season, but you know, I think if we can get more races and do well, I think the full season can develop pretty nicely.
Final thing, let me ask you. I mean, you've got Charlie Kimball's a race winner as a teammate. You've got Scott Dixon, Tony Kanaan are champions. You've got a 3-time Indy 500 winner, Dario Franchitti, over my shoulder, who's been coaching you. How big has it been, I mean, to just lean on those guys? Because you mentioned St. Pete was kind of a rough outing, to get back in the flow of things and lean on those guys for information.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing having guys like that. It's almost like too much information at some points. I'm just a giant sponge right now. You know, St. Pete was tough for us, but I mean, my wrist was broken and it was rough. I'd say I was racing with a wrist that was 45%, and I don't want to blame that or anything, but I was more mentally not confident than I am now. So, right now I'm coming in, wrist about 85%, everything's feeling a lot better, and the shows right now, right on the timesheets right away, we're feeling a lot better. So, I go to these guys whenever I'm feeling like I need some guidance and everything, and they're the best guys in the business to talk to. So, I can't thank these guys enough.
Can't disagree with that. Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
That is Sage Karam. It's a sharp-looking car this weekend, Jake Query. Comfort Revolution on the side pods, a red and black livery. Very nice-looking car for rookie Sage Karam.
Speaking of black cars that are good, with copper, as a matter of fact, on them, that's the case with Joseph Newgarden and that familiar number 67. And what's not familiar to race fans, Joseph, is this racetrack. First time here to NOLA Motorsports Park, and I've been interested in getting everybody's reaction now as you've gotten extensive time out there. What is your thought on this track itself?
Well, it's a cool facility. You're right. The black and gold looks pretty cool here in New Orleans. I feel like we're almost the Saints special. So 67 is a good car to root for, I think, here in New Orleans. But it's a cool track. It's new for us. We've never been here before with IndyCar, and it's a place that we'd like to make a home, I think, for the future and continue to improve. But I think they've put a lot of really good work into it. It's a fun track to drive. It really is fast, very flowing. I like that you can see all of it. Most of the fans at any of these grandstands can see the entire track, which is unique. You don't get that everywhere. So I think the visibility here is really good for people. They get to see the speed, the braking power, the acceleration of IndyCars, the cornering speeds, all that good stuff that people aren't exposed to normally. But it's a great track. I hope we get a good event this weekend, and I hope we can just make it bigger and better for years to come.
One of the things that I've been asking a lot of guys, but I find it an interesting answer from people. When you come to a track in which you've never been before, I realize testing, but how many laps do you have to do to kind of get it ingrained in you and memorize, if you will, the track so that you know and anticipate where the line is?
These guys are pretty good. Honestly, it probably takes 4 to 5 laps for anyone that comes here to figure it out. At least the IndyCar drivers, they're really fast and switched on at figuring it out. Figuring out the absolute setup, that works perfectly around here and that really gives you solid lap time, that's more difficult. But as a driver, you know your way around the track, before you even set on the track, because you have to. Time is always so limited with how long you can run around a track in IndyCar. You only get so many laps, so you need to know the track before you even get on it. And then, within 4 or 5 laps, these guys are so good that they have it dialed in pretty quickly in their memory for where they want to be turning, where they want to be braking, what type of speeds they need to carry into the corners. They're just all really, really switched on at figuring it out pretty quick.
Lastly, let me ask you, this is, as we know, and we talked about this with Birmingham, this is typically NASCAR territory. It has been historically, at least. Do you kind of feel an obligation or a responsibility or the fun, for example, in knowing that some of these fans, it might be a first time out, might be a new introduction to them, and to try to get another area where we can get people turned on to the Verizon Indycar Series?
Yeah, what's cool is we were down here promoting this race during Mardi Gras. Obviously New Orleans, it's famous for Mardi Gras. It's famous for their festivals, the music, the many different events that they have here that they do a great job of creating a party. And, I'm sure they do have plenty of NASCAR fans down here, but when we were here for Mardi Gras, I swear I've never met so many people that were excited to see an IndyCar race. They knew we were coming. They knew the date. They had tickets already, and people all mentioned IndyCar racing, that they wanted to see that. And not a lot of people have seen it before. So just the fact that everyone was kind of up to speed that IndyCar was coming to town was awesome. And, again, I think this is the type of town we want to come to. They're a town that knows how to put on a race, put on a party, and I think it's a place that we can grow. So, I think hopefully in the future this becomes an IndyCar city.
That black and gold, the Hulman oil, the Treasure Chest Casino, it's going to be faster than a float for Joseph Newgarden. Have a good weekend here.
Thanks so much.
Joseph Newgarden in car 67. Nick Yeoman?
Still just a couple of cars on the racetrack at the moment. I saw Jack Hawksworth head on the racetrack moments ago. Those on the big screens are seeing Marco Andretti make his way around this course here at NOLA Motorsports Park. I didn't get a chance to talk to James Jakes, who's back in the Verizon Indycar Series after a one-year hiatus. James, you're watching Marco. What do you think of this racetrack, and what do you think of the conditions as of right now?
It's a fun place to be, obviously, the inaugural Grand Prix of New Orleans. It's nice to be here, and nice to be back in the series. I think the track's gonna, it's gonna dry up pretty quickly here. If we were in qualifying right now, I'm pretty sure everyone will be on slicks already. We're just kind of waiting for the track to get a little bit better before we run again. So I don't think it'll be long here before the fans see, majority of the cars on track.
Heard a lot of drivers talk about turn one, that long straightaway down there, probably being the best passing opportunity. What about the bumps? Is it quite bumpy heading into turn number one?
Yeah, it's very bumpy, and on the inside it seems to be even more bumps. But I think here and then turn 10 here at the end of the straight, they're going to be the two best zones for for passing. So yeah, I guess if you were looking from an overtaking point of view, you kind of want to place yourself down at turn 1 or over here at going into turn 10.
What was it like getting back in IndyCar after 1 year away from the sport at St. Petersburg?
It was good. It was nice to be back, and obviously, with a great team, Schmidt-Peterson Motorsport. And this was actually the first place I drove when I came back, so it was kind of a cool spot to do it in, and obviously being a first Grand Prix here is nice as well.
And you're still going by Buckshot, right? That's the nickname we're sticking with?
That is still here, yes. It's obviously it's here to stay, but yeah, it was just something to deficit me and James, because the engineering meeting just got quite challenging.
I like it. All right, James Buckshot Jakes is not hopping in those cars quite yet. Jake Query is most of these drivers still hanging out on pit boxes.
And right here as they're hanging out along pit road, a little bit cooler than it was earlier. My apologies, Nick, if you might have mentioned this earlier, but I happened to notice during the practice session earlier today that the track temperature was 111 degrees. The ambient was at 83 degrees. The air was very, very sticky, no question about it. And, of course, this course was dry. Now you have a wet course that eventually will dry. Juan Montoya was one of those that said, look, I would have liked to have gone out there when it was at its absolute peak of being wet, but he was told, there was some standing water there. It might not have been a good idea for the cars. Montoya seemed to go ahead and accept that answer and get ready to go out, and we'll see if eventually people can go on dries, because Helio Castroneves had told me that with those 6 sets of wet tires, Will Power, his teammate, of course, agreed with this, that you got to be a little bit careful, because we think there's the possibility they might need the wet tires throughout the course of the weekend. But right now the track temperature is at 84 degrees. That's some 27 degrees cooler than what the track temperature was just a few hours ago. The ambient temperature now at 73 degrees. That a 10-degree difference. And, of course, Paul, the biggest difference, as you can tell as soon as you walk outside here in Louisiana, the air is just a lot thinner. It was very, very sticky earlier today.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy air, Jake. That's exactly right. And, another thing we have to do is give a tip of the hat to the New Orleans race fans, because they're already in the tradition of IndyCar fans. They just went and hid during the rain itself, and now quite a few of them moving back into the grandstand. So that's a nice thing to see, and that tradition continues on even though we're here at a brand new racetrack. So out on the track are guys like Hawksworth, and Marco Andretti was out for a bit. The 11 car of Sebastian Bourdais was out there. Montoya was out, then he came back, got out of the car, and took a seat on the side of his teammate Helio Castroneves' car. So we're beginning to see a little action going on, Mark.
Yeah, we saw a handful of drivers go out, Paul, and as you mentioned early on, when we talked to those drivers up and down pit lane, they said that they were either hoping for an all-wet track or an all-dry track, and they had to be concerned with tire management. They didn't want to put the wets on and have them burn up because the track was so dry, and didn't want to risk running out there with the slicks, hitting water, and losing control of the race car. That's typically not a good mix, those Firestone slicks with that wet pavement. So Jack Hawksworth among those we see heading out on the pit road, try to get some laps in, and we have, Paul, just 3 or 4 cars that have actually turned laps to the point to where they've taken time, and we're 15 minutes into this session that's scheduled to wrap up at about 6:25.
Yeah, there have been actually 8 cars out there, but only 3 of them even showing any time, and that's not even worth looking at. We're talking like a minute 42, a minute 51, so you're still building up, still trying to find out a great deal about it. And perhaps, Nick and Jake, you can look up and down the lane and see how many people are sitting there on dries, because I got to tell you, the track is beginning to dry.
I think that number is probably decreasing by the second, Paul, because just for example, right now I look at James Jakes. He is on wet tires. So too behind him would be Gabby Chavez should they go out. But I think that probably are still the tires that they used to transport out with, and they would eventually be going on to slicks. I was surprised earlier at a couple of them that did go out on slicks, what presumably to me looked to be a little bit early, and I think perhaps was optimistic, but as Will Power had mentioned, probably just an install lap to see exactly how wet the track exactly was. I walk through now and look, and I come up on the car of Sage Karam, for example, who Nick talked to. He is on slicks right now. So I think right now it's probably about half and half, but I get the feeling that as we move along here, everybody eventually, fairly early on in going out there, is going to go to the slick tires and not the wets.
That certainly would be the objective. Right now you're seeing the sky condition change. It gets a little lighter, it gets a little darker. Just the kind of thing that drives the IndyCar teams nuts when they're trying to figure this sort of thing out. And we'll be back right after this.
If there's one thing Firestone's learned over its 100 years in racing, it's that if you don't keep moving forward, you're going to get left behind. So even though Firestone has more Indy 500 wins than any other tire on the planet, we're always more concerned with what we've done for you lately. That's why we're constantly trying to make our tires stronger, last longer, and handle better than ever. And we bring that same commitment to every tire we make, whether it's for the racetrack or for the open road. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
Out and with a good ride and making a name for himself this year. There is one very good story in today's copy of USA Today that talks about Sage and the fact that Dario Franchitti has taken him under his wing to a degree. And yeah, that's one of the neat things for the great champions like Franchitti, to bring the next champions along.
Dario, with the line of the weekend at St. Petersburg, when we talked to him on pit road, he said Sage is it's like he's drinking water from a fire hose right now in terms of the analogy about the level of information that's being thrown at him. But as you heard Sage say himself, at his disposal, the likes of Barry Wanzer and Mike Hull and certainly Chip Ganassi, and then of course you have teammates like Charlie and TK and Scott Dixon, and oh, by the way, Dario Franchitti's is there as well, offering up words of wisdom. And the thing about Dario, I think that's so valuable for a kid like Sage Karam is not only his talent and his ability, but the fact that he was nothing but pure class and a sportsman throughout his entire motorsports career. And I think, Paul, those lessons are as valuable as any of the lessons that he can teach Sage inside the cockpit.
Well, it appears that the track has gone quiet for the moment. Searching through the different monitors, I don't see a car out there. What I do see, though, is kind of a meeting of the Penske organization, some of the key people there. Montoya kind of holding court out on the pit lane, and Tim Cindric, who is taller than about everybody else in that team, about everybody else in IndyCar, is standing there. So they're beginning to talk about what it is that they can do, or else they're really having one of those great joke and story sessions. Either way, Penske team on pit road while they wait to see when they will go out and what the changing track conditions will be. Right now in the cars, another people, Gabby Chavez has been strapped in his cockpit, kind of waiting for the opportunity to go out in the 98 car. But at this moment, Mark, and it kind of surprises me a little bit, it seems like it's gone quiet. Jake?
Yeah, I think the reason for that
is apparently that Jake has no microphone. We'll wait and see if we can get Jake back to give us the actual reason why it's sitting so quiet. Those that we're seeing, though, on the pit road still, many of those we're seeing, Chavez being an example a few minutes ago, still have the rain tires strapped on. Okay, do we have you back, Jake?
Yeah, I think what happens here, Paul, and the reason why this track has gone quiet is simple, and not to continue to belabor the point, but when I first came out onto pit road off microphone, Elio Castroneves and I were talking, and he had expressed the fact, hey, look, if we've got 6 sets of red tires, and I know that it's probably not what race fans want to hear, and we're not supposed to talk about it, but the reality is that Mother Nature perhaps is planning on this being a predominantly wet event over the course of the weekend. Now, if that's the case, you've always got to plan for worst case scenario. I was a Cub Scout once. I know you always have to be prepared. And being prepared for the potential for wets over the course of the weekend, these teams each have 6 sets of the wet tires. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, those are simply the treaded tires that allow you that grip to move through in a wet condition. If there are 6 sets of them and these teams are anticipating the possibility that it may be a wet track both for another practice session, for a qualifying session, for multiple rounds of a qualifying session, and as well in race conditions, they want to preserve those tires. In addition to that, they are given 11 sets of the regular primary tire, or regular tires, 8 of them being the primary, 3 the softer compound tires we talked about earlier. What I think we are seeing right now is everyone simply waiting for this track to go dry so they can go out and in using up tires for this practice session, they will be using tires that will go off of that allotment of the 8 tires they have to use over the course of the race weekend that are dry tires. They simply want to preserve those wet tires in the possibility that this particular track is going to stay wet over the course of the weekend. Just as I say that, Paul, it's my understanding this session now, scheduled for another 40 minutes or so, a red flag has flown.
Yeah, they have 20 minutes and 55 seconds of green. Then they've just brought the red out, and we're waiting to find out exactly what they plan to do. The first word is that they hope to dry the traffic a little bit more so that they can, in fact, I assume, get out on the dries. And for the people here, the new race fans to IndyCar in New Orleans, they're about to find out that when we do race in the wet, it's the great equalizer, and it's spectacular to see the cars come screaming down these straightaways with rooster tails coming off the tires. It's pretty significant moments to see that. So the fans, sometime this weekend, I'll bet are going to get a big taste of that.
Spoken like a guy that calls it from the booth.
When it's dry.
No, I've been out at places like Mid-Ohio. I've been out at St. Petersburg. We've called it in the wet before, and I got to be honest with you. It's as you suggest. It is a great equalizer, and it presents an interesting dynamic. And there have been times when we would have liked to have seen it, and wondered why it didn't happen. For instance, Toronto, comes to mind recently. But we understand, again, the problem we had with Toronto is the fact that there was standing water on the course. There was nowhere for that water to go, and it simply was not safe for the drivers to be out there. And that's what this series focuses on by and large. They certainly want to be fan-friendly and want to be entertaining. We have a group of drivers to protect, too. So hopefully Mother Nature will continue to cooperate. We can get this track dry, and we can get the last few minutes of this session in before we call it a day here at NOLA.
Well, and one of the big things that they're concerned with is hydroplaning, which you can do in your car on an interstate or a roadway, and that is that the tire itself loses contact with the surface and is actually floating over the water, and then you have absolutely no control. It's like being on ice. So that's a pretty big concern. Nick? Oh, thought Nick was there for us. We'll be back right after this.
If there's one thing Firestone's learned over its...
So the Big Easy. In fact, there's a whole lot of people. I'm looking at one of them right now. His name is Mark Janes, who I think is ready to head down into town when these sessions over today.
I think a Hurricane, the good kind, and Pat O'Brien's might be in the offing in the French Quarter for you and I, Paul Page. We'll let the younger generation of guys like Jay Query and Nick Yeoman bounce around the French Quarter.
I'm following them.
We'll live vicariously through them. But you go ahead and try to keep up with him.
Will you go my bail?
The last time, I didn't bring that much money. The last time I was in the French Quarter was in 1987. I was down here with Indiana State Baseball from Terre Haute, Indiana, and it was right in between Mardi Gras and the Final Four, the year Bob Knight's Hoosiers won the national championship with that shot by Keith Smart, and it was still all a buzz, trust me. But it doesn't matter if it's surrounding a big event or not. There's always a buzz in the French Quarter, and we're excited for the chance to be able to visit there.
I got to tell you, this is pretty special for me. I've only been through this town once in my life. That was years and years ago when I was driving the One Lap of America, and we passed through. We stopped for maybe 10 minutes on Bourbon Street in the middle of the day, took some video for the show we were doing, and moved on. So I'm really pumped about being here.
Is that picture when you and Ray Haroon did that lap?
Yeah, Ray and I were there, yeah. And we had the first rearview mirror. It was amazing. Okay, enough of that. How about Carlos Huertas? Nick, you around?
Yeah, I was going to say, save me there. The last time I remember a racetrack being this wet, I think Carlos Huertas went to Victory Lane. That was in Houston a year ago. You like the wet conditions, but nobody going on the racetrack. What's the plan for you here?
Just waiting, hoping for the track to get dry so we can get some dry running in, because if it rains Saturday and Sunday, it's pointless to waste tires today.
How about your personal goals for year two? I mean, you ask any rookie driver, and if they say, yeah, we want to race, mission accomplished. What's your goals for year two now with Dale Coyne Racing?
Just get better and better, improve on the areas that I'm not so strong or that I need to get better at from last year. Obviously, I need to get better on the ovals, but I think the experience that I had last year is going to help me, hopefully be more consistent. But obviously this year everything changed a lot because the cars changed, so it's like starting from zero again for everybody.
You're a guy that's very stoic. Are we going to find you out on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter at all down here in New Orleans? They like to party. That's what I plan on doing. You got any plans for that tonight?
I don't think so because I like to sleep, so I need to get at least 10 hours sleep, so 9:30, 10 I'm in bed.
10 hours of sleep?
Yeah, 10 to 12 is nice.
I don't think I'm going to get that much. We'll let you enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully it clears up. Thanks.
Thank you.
That is Carlos Huertas, our winner from Houston a year ago. And Paul, still red flagged and still no drivers hopping in race cars.
Yeah, the Humaltra safety team is out there. There's only one truck that, well, no, there are several now that I've noticed out there trying once again to get some movement, maybe kick the water in the puddles, though there are very few, but there's still some damp areas, kick the water up in the air and get it to evaporate. One of the difficult things, though, Mark, is in an area like this, where you have a high humidity, it's kind of where's the water going to go? The air is already pretty saturated.
Well, and again, a flat racetrack, not a lot of drainage here. As we're watching, a young fan on the video board really enjoying himself here at NOLA. That's a great thing about kids that age. They can find just absolutely anything to entertain themselves.
You looked like that one day. You were excited about these cars.
That's the problem. You combine that with the atmospheric conditions and the temperatures and whatnot, and it's a long and slow, rather tedious process. Nick Yeoman on pit road. Jack Hawksworth, the young man who, boy, I tell you, he didn't get a top 10 the conventional way at St. Petersburg. I don't think I remember a driver in recent memory that worked so hard for a top 10, in fact.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mark, it seems like every race that we go to, there's always one guy that has one of those interesting days, and you always hope that it ends up on the positive side, and that's how I would describe, Jack, your weekend in St. Pete, especially that race. I mean, there were some lows, but to end up with a top 10 run in your first run with this ABC Supply AJ Foyt team had to be mission accomplished, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, from where we started, it was great. Obviously, the big low was qualifying, but the race was big high. We knew we had a really quick car because we'd been very fast in practice and stuff, and obviously we had the unfortunate incident in qualifying. But apart from that, the car was very quick in the race, and had a good fun race. We had some lows and highs in the race as well, to be honest, but good strategy from the boys, and a really fast car enabled us to get to the front. So good start to the season, lots of points. I'd like to be a bit further up, and that's what we'll try to do the next few weekends.
A year ago with Brian Herta's team, you're a rookie, one-car team. I mean, you're trying to learn, the team's trying to learn. Not a lot of data to bounce it off of with teammates. How big is it to have a guy like Takuma Sato, who, I mean, historically has just been awfully fast on some of these road and street courses, especially with this AJ Foyt team? I mean, a two-car operation, I would assume, has to help you quite a bit.
No, it's obviously completely different environment, two cars, and I'm working with some really good personnel, which is really good. Takuma's really easy guy to work with, and I think the people we've got on the team are really got a really good set of guys. So pretty excited about what we can do this year. We're just working away every day, every week to try and keep smoothing out any issues we do have and get better and better. And I think we showed Takuma and myself, the team's got a lot of speed, and we got a little bit of work to do to get right to the front, but we're not far off it, and certainly that's the target.
I asked Carlos Huertas if he's the Bourbon Street, New Orleans type guy, and he said he's going to get at least 10 hours of sleep. We're going to see you out enjoying yourself at all this weekend?
Well, I don't think I'm going to get 10 hours of sleep. I can't remember if I ever get 10 hours of sleep. But, I'd probably be staying early night. And, on these race weekends, you come to all these amazing places. People ask you, what do you get up to? You just say, I saw the hotel, the track, and the airport, and that was about it.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
That is Jack Hawksworth. Paul, I'll tell you what, all these race car drivers, they're way too professional. I'm going to party tonight. I'm not going to lie.
Well, exactly, and I think they're probably not necessarily giving you the entire truth. I know that there are a number of the teams that are planning on finding the good side of New Orleans and having a great time tonight. Right down the pit straightaway right now, just a long procession of trucks, many of them wreckers, the lights flashing, yellow lights on top of the trucks, trying to see what they can do about getting the track just a little bit drier. Right now we've had 9 minutes, almost 10 minutes of red flag. And in the session right now, we're at just over 30 minutes of what is scheduled to be a 1 hour session. And Jake, what do you have for us?
Ryan Hunter-Ray actually was taking a look over that very familiar DHL, car number 28, looking over his Honda. And, I talked to Graham Rahal earlier today. He made an interesting point to me. He said that when he first talked to you about this track, you said, Graham, I'm not going to lie to you, I had some teammates that we could bounce stuff off of, and maybe that was why you were a little faster in the test. Take me through the first time you went through this track and the advantage, Ryan, of having other guys, obviously, that you can look over the data and learn about what works here at this motorsports park.
Oh, well, it always helps to have teammates. You know, it's more information that you can use, whether good or bad, knowing what to do or what not to do. So it is more information, and the quicker you can get to the bottom of it, the quicker you're going to be and the faster you're going to be on track. So,
what challenges did you notice? I mean, you personally, when you went out, what part of this track did you think, yeah, boy, I'm ready to get back in there and see what Carlos or what Marco has, because this part has confused me, if any?
You know, there's just there's a couple tricky sections that you can drive it. Some drivers are driving it one way, some are driving it another way. There's a couple ways to slice it, and if you're in a situation to look at other drivers' data and understand how they're doing it, you can maybe put it together. So the turn 11, 12, 13 complex, for instance, that's a pretty tricky section. There's a couple different ways to do it, and we've seen a variety from from the Chevys and the Hondas on how to get through there. So that goes for another part of the track too, over on the other end, turn 3, 4, 5.
You know, life's been pretty good to you, to Ryan Hunter-Reay here in the last year or so, obviously, from a family standpoint, from the Indianapolis 500 standpoint. And with that, I wanted to ask you also to have DHL back on board for another year. You know, this is a deal that was done a while ago, I realize, but it's the first time I've gotten a chance to talk to you in 2015 to know that you've got a great partner with you again.
Yeah, first year of a 3-year deal here with DHL and Andretti Autosport. So it's definitely good times ahead, and we're getting through it here, lap by lap, test by test, and race by race. Hopefully we can put this 28 DHL Honda up towards the front this weekend.
Car looks good. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
That's Ryan Hunter-Reay. Paul?
Hey, Jake, as you're standing right there, look up and down a little bit. As they're trying to dry the track, there was the mention earlier that maybe the cars are sitting on the tires that they use just to roll them out into the pits, which would be wet. But do you see, it seems to me I'm seeing a couple cars with dry tires on it just waiting for the moment. Is that what you're seeing?
I think that's exactly what we're going to see, yeah. I don't think that we will see anybody else go back on this track today unless it's on the dry tires. And, again, that reason being they're going to wait until this track is dry and then just preserve. You got to keep in mind,
and give these guys an opportunity to get some laps in at speed. And, again, an interesting approach and an interesting mindset, Paul, because there's a pretty good chance that sometime during the course of this weekend those wet tires are going to be needed. But I also understand from a tire management standpoint in terms of what's available to these teams and these drivers throughout the course of the weekend, it would have been really, really difficult to get much accomplished early on in that session with the conditions of the track. Because, again, if you go out there with the slicks and you hit water, you're going to lose every bit of traction regardless of the amount of downforce that's on these cars. But by the same token, Paul, with all of the dry areas that there were on the track, it would have just had a cheese grater effect on those rain tires. So, that all went into the decision-making process.
Nothing at all.
Race control maintains checkers at 6:25. So, Paul, best case scenario, I think, at this time, if they got into the cockpit right now, as we got Coletti among those, just getting ready to put the helmet on. If you figure, if it takes 2 to 3 minutes to get up to speed, you're looking at about 10 minutes of green time for these drivers here to wrap up the day.
One of the safety trucks heading for its station right down the pit straight just a moment ago, and the others backing into position at their stations throughout the course. And Will Power has just gotten into a position where his crew member is helping him put on his Hans device and his helmet. We've had 27 minutes and 30 seconds of red. We're anticipating to go green, start those engines, fire up, and go green any time now. Already the yellow flag is being held in the air straight up at the starter stand, which is an indication to the teams to prepare yourselves, and we're going to fire those engines and get going. And so that is good news. The bad side of it is what Mark just mentioned. We have just burned off 49 minutes of this session. And so we're only going to have, 10 minutes to go. If I don't do math in public, but occasionally it works. And they say there's 1 minute to go, and they're going to
yellow
tell
flag
them
in
to
the air.
head
Paul
out of there.
Blevins. Paul Blevins is in the flag stand. He's flagging the race this weekend, and he puts the yellow flag in the air, signifying that we have 1 minute to go before those engines will fire, and we'll get some laps in. And again, it's great news for those that have been here most of this day. enjoying all of the various series that we're running here. 2/3 of the Mazda Road to Indy series are here this weekend, and we look forward to watching their exploits over the course of the weekend. And it's good to see the IndyCar Series get the opportunity to turn some laps here.
And it's good to see the new fans find out, well, occasionally it does rain, but this is what you do. You wait, you have a good time, talk, go back, the green flag waves, and we're going to go with the session as a green flag session, and the cars already begin to roll out. In fact, right now there are 5 of them on the pit road going out and take a look at what this course is going to be like. I imagine they're going to tiptoe a little bit first time around.
Had the opportunity to go out during one of the breaks of the actions and climb up on the lifts. Jake Query will be into that long 3,000-foot long main straightaway and watch that dogfight into turn number 1. And all of the drivers firmly believe that turn 1 and turn 10 will be the optimum passing zones on this course. I'll be at the other end. I'll get them off of turn number 9 as they come down what is essentially the back straightaway here as they get ready to set up for that turn number 10, and I'll carry them all the way through 13. So a picturesque view, some 30 to 40 feet in the air for both of us, and we're anxious to have the opportunity to watch these drivers tackle this course under race conditions for the first time come Sunday.
Well, let's consider for a moment as they are warming up on their first lap, most of the cars heading out there. What this is that long straightaway that you mentioned to what is almost a right angle right-hand turn. That's turn 1. It's kind of bumpy on the inside of the approach there, a little smoother the further to the left, the further to the outside you go. Into that turn, then sweep back turn 2 to the left, and then into a tight hairpin, which is turn 3, which leads you a very short little run into turn 4, which is a hairpin, but it's a little bit wider. Then again, a short run. Turn 5 is angled to the right, as is turn 6, a little steeper, almost 90 degrees. Slight angle for turn 7, and that gives you a pretty good run down to turn 8 and 9, a little bit of a switchback, and then a long run where they get their terminal velocity as they run down into turn 10, where they turn right, swing back immediately to the left for 11, and 12 is a right-hander, and that's where they make the choice to either go into the pits or to continue on the lap. And turn 13, that's the last one on the course, and that's, of course, where you're going to be watching.
Yep, 2,300 feet, that back straightaway that you mentioned coming off of turn number 9, and the length of the racetrack as they wind their way through that 10 through 12 portion of the course is a little over 1,300 feet. That's 1,354 feet, but the thing to note about this, folks, no banking of the turns, and it is extremely flat, and as Paul said, in some key passing zones, there's some noticeable bumps that we have seen on the monitor today. The drivers have talked about them.
And so as finally they're back on the course, and finally on this lap, we should see some of the speeds actually posted. It seems like everybody, for example, at the moment, the onboard camera is on the screens here, and on your streaming showing the onboard from Juan Montoya as he works his way around, of course, the winner of the first race of the season 2 weeks ago at St. Petersburg, and he's happy about that, happier even that he has a chance to do it again. They are, without question, Penske the people you're going to have to watch here.
It's staggering to me to think that Roger Penske, with all the success that he's had in motorsports, and one of the reasons why he's had some success, Paul, is that he is far from wanting to rest on his laurels. And let's face it, there's Juan Montoya throws his hand up.
He darted to the left. We're watching an onboard camera. He darted to the left to make a pass, and all of a sudden James Hinchcliffe was right in front of him, moving a little slower on the left-hand side. And Juan just extended his hand out like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? That's
and
right.
Now he's back in pursuit, back up to speed. But I'm sure he wasn't real happy with that, especially if he was trying to find a time. Through a couple of puddles, though. He just kicked up an awful lot of water, as there's still out there quite a few puddles on the course, but it didn't seem to bother him all that much.
We were talking about Team Penske. They come off a season in which not only do they win a championship, but they also win a runner-up. They had 3 of their drivers, Paul, in the top 5 in points to wrap up the season, and they go out and get another guy who finished in the top 5 in points, in Simon Pagenaud, to create a 4-team juggernaut. So that's what the rest of the paddock is facing in terms of this 4-pronged approach that Roger Penske and Tim Cindric is taking, and we saw the fruits of their off-season labor pay off in spades at St. Petersburg as they swept the top spots in qualifying and were so very dominant in the race.
Helio Castroneves is out there as well, and do have to say, it haven't even started the second race of the season, so to assign total dominance to anybody at this point would be a little bit much. I'm sure that there are a whole lot of guys that want to say, no, we're going to come up.
Well, and again, like last year, okay, we did have, quite frankly, 10 different winners last season, a record. But Paul, bottom line is this, and I'm not the first one that's made this point. It was made many, many times before we started to broach it. Bottom line is this. Multi-car teams, regardless of how many different winners we have, it's the multi-car teams that are best built for success over the long haul, and I think that's why year in and year out, at least in recent memory, you have seen the multi-car teams like Andretti, like Ganassi, and Penske competing for championships as we get to the close of the season. Now, certainly, there are some teams that could quite frankly, disrupt that party. I know we talked about it at St. Petersburg. I know these drivers are not easily intimidated, if intimidated at all. If they were, this would not be their trade, but they got to have a lot of respect for how deep and competitive this paddock is, because you could go a long way down that starting grid and find a driver that you can conceivably list as a guy or gal that's capable of winning on any given weekend.
Every time they look down the front straightaway to that right hand that is turn one, there is that ripple, and it, like we said it a couple of times, a little more prominent to the inside, but it's definitely unsettling to the cars. We just got a really good look at Jack Hawksworth in his 41 car. He tried to use the inside line. He was battling with somebody else, and the ripple really had him bouncing, and finally he had to just lock the brakes up and try and get it stopped before getting into that corner, because it was going to go wrong.
Couple of laps into this session, Paul, we've still yet to see a few cars cross the timing and scoring line for the first time. Talking about Pagenaud, Sage Karam, Scott Dixon. Haven't seen Tony Kanaan clear a time yet. Huerta, Stracconi, Newgarden, and Kimball. We have had 16 cars now post-time so far in this session.
What we are seeing is a lot of the cars here also trying to pass, trying to find out where their places are. Again, turn 1, turn 10 is what they say is going to be the place. Remember, too, that IndyCar, after they had a bit of a problem with some of the new pieces coming off the cars with contact at St. Pete, have strengthened a number of them. One example might be, if you remember, the front wing of the Chevrolet has kind of almost what looks like a little table or a place where they could put their tools, but it's a key aerodynamic device. It just comes up and then it flattens into a wing. Down at the base of that, they've added a number of layers of carbon under there, carbon fiber, to strengthen that up, and then strengthen to some degree the way that the fasteners actually go down to attach that to the front ring. So a couple things like that hopefully will help keep them on the car.
Marco Andretti for now is P1, but this pace is well off of what we saw in the 119s of the earlier session. Hawksworth, as we mentioned, as the session continues, we expect the pace to quicken. Hawksworth now at P1 at 123.74. Again, we were in the 119 range earlier today. That gives you an idea just how much conditions have changed. Andretti, Coletti, Jakes, and Filippi the top 5, and then Munoz, Sato, Power, Montoya, Castro Neves, Simona Di Silvestro, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Simon Pagenaud, Hinch, Graham Rahal, and Gabby Chavez have all turned laps, some of them not necessarily at speed. The most turned in the session, 6 by Hawksworth and Andretti. But again, off 119s earlier today, we're in the 123.2 range.
Right at 2 minutes to go in this session, and then it will be done until tomorrow. It's kind of neat taking a look at some of these cars, especially like Graham Rahal, bright yellow car. But when it comes straight at you, it has the Honda configuration up front in terms of the aero pack, and it just has a really mean look to it when you see it coming head on.
Good-looking race cars all over the racetrack, no question.
Yeah, the changes that they made over the winter to, one, help identify the cars a little better, Chevrolet versus Honda, and to give a little more expansion to the concept of technology and design, seems to have really worked out. I mean, I love the appearance of both cars. They're different, but they're cool to look at.
I agree with a lot of the observations. Some of them even sitting still look fast.
Here's the problem with that. I love the way almost any race car looks.
Yeah,
I just think they're so cool. Well, we're coming up with 1 minute to go if they actually run on the clock. IndyCar has tried to help these drivers out in any way they can, giving them a little extra time. We don't anticipate that. We should be done in about 54 seconds, but we don't know. They may give them some time. They've been ad-libbing the schedule a little bit today to try to help everybody out. We'll see what happens now. James Jakes has gone to the top, followed by Elio Castroneves, Hunter Ray in third, Sato now to fourth, Di Silvestro to fifth, and Hawksworth and Andretti, who were on the top just a moment ago, are now sixth and seventh. James Jakes comes back up to the top, and that pushes Castroneves, Hunter Ray, and Sato down.
122 now, the quick lap. 122.3. Again, that's off 119s this morning. As Paul told you, Jakes, Elio, Ryan Hunter-Ray, Sato, Di Silvestro now sixth quick, Hawksworth, Rahal, Andretti, then Coletti, Felipe, Munoz, Power, Montoya, Hinchcliffe, and Chavez. Those guys just turned a couple of installation laps.
We'll keep an eye on the starter stand now because we should be just a second or so away from the end of this session. It remains green as they go past that original scheduled time. So they're going to keep them out there at least a little bit longer. And they have decided 5 more minutes is the way to go. So they are trying to help them in every way they can.
Yeah, I think some of the teams that have still not turned a lap, Paul, it's going to be interesting to see. Given the difference in the times, although Coletti now is in the 121.5 range, as we mentioned, 119, you got to wonder, those teams that are choosing not to take advantage of this session, if it's a tire management issue as much as anything. I mean, Ganassi, for instance, you look at the fact that Karam hasn't turned a lap, Dixon hasn't turned a lap, Kanaan hasn't turned a lap, and neither has Charlie Kimball. Apparently they don't feel like that this session offered them maybe much to be gained, and it's more important to go into the day tomorrow to have the full allotment of tires at their disposal.
Ryan Hunter-Ray just goes quick for this session, but it's a 120.9, so well off the times that we saw in the earlier session, but we're also talking a racetrack that is still somewhat damp. You know what I keep seeing, though? Every time I look up there, the top 10, top 5, I see Coletti's name. Now, here's a new guy, Stefano. He looks like somebody in the rookie class that we're going to want to keep track of. So as we move to these now final moments, it's more official. We've got about 4.5 minutes left to go, and we'll see if they add any time or speed to this. Coletti just goes around Ryan Hunter-Ray. He runs a 120.9 and picks up quick again. Marco Andretti moved up to fifth just now, 122.2. So again, as we often see at the end of these sessions, we're seeing some change up in the top of the form. You know, at least you can go home if you're going down to Bourbon Street or elsewhere in the downtown. You can now go down as a race driver and say, yeah, my name's Coletti. I, by the way, was number 1 out there today.
Well, Paul, we're just watching on one of the monitors here. My apologies. The in-car camera showed Charlie Kimball, and yet I don't see a time up for Charlie Kimball in terms of time and scoring. So, matter of fact, we're watching the in-car camera on the monitor now with Charlie Kimball. We're ensconced in a booth in which we have no view out the window of the racetrack, and so we rely not only on the multi-camera monitor but also timing and scoring. And for some reason, we don't see a time posted for Kimball, for Karam, Dixon, Kanaan, Huertas, Draconi, and Newgarden. Perhaps we shouldn't make the assumption based upon that they've not turned any laps, even though we haven't seen them on the monitor other than Kimball.
Pagano goes number 1 just a moment ago. He's followed by Power and by Coletti. So we're going to check out, we have actually 2 different systems of scoring. They are both fed by the same antennas and the track lines out on the track, but you'll see, you could take your little transponder off and go out, but you get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, now we see a time posted by Charlie Kimball that finally pops up. So we've been watching him turn a couple of laps, and maybe he just went on to the racetrack, but we still don't have a time according to either of the timing and scoring systems that we employ. We don't see a time for Karam, Dixon, Kanaan, Huertas, Draconi, and Newgarden.
Pagano, now Hunter-Ray goes number 1, followed by Pagano, Power, Coletti, and Di Silvestro. That's your top 5. Not that many laps actually turned. The most thus far turned by Marco Andretti. He's turned 10. Of course, we had a long red session here and really just got going only a few minutes ago. Almost everybody else is in the 8, 5, 6, 7, and 8 category, and Charlie Kimball just comes up with 1 lap, as does Chavez. Has now turned 1 lap on the clock. Sebastian Bourdais has only turned 2. So it's been a mixed bag as we go into the final minute of this session. And one car getting off back on the backside of the circuit, but in fact is able to get it back under power, get out of the way, and get going once again. James Jakes is the guy, and he comes back up to speed. No harm, no foul for him, but he did take a little off-course excursion. The back end just got away from him. He got off the edge of the track. That spun him around 180 degrees. He looked backwards, looking at the oncoming traffic, and then rolled it off into the gravel, powered it back up, and back on the road. So now we're counting down the final seconds of this session, probably the final 10 coming up right now.
Yeah, pretty good move by Jakes to keep that thing under power, so he did not bring out the red flag and it didn't necessitate a tow or a restart. But yeah, Will Power continues to pace, and Paul, this extra 5 minutes of the session as the checkers flies allowed some of these drivers to get themselves at least in the neighborhood of where they were in this session earlier today under drastically different conditions. Power, Hunter-Reay, Pagenaud, Coletti. Those four, Power, Hunter-Reay, Pagenaud, and Coletti got themselves in the 120 range. Power flirted with 119, as did Ryan Hunter-Reay. They were at 121 and 120.27. Pagenaud at 120.55, and Coletti at a minute 20.90.
They started with a very wet track. The officials decided then, you know what, let's try and get this a little drier. We had 28 minutes and 41 seconds of red flag. Well, they did just exactly that. But once they got back on the track, it seemed, especially since they come back on with the dry tires, the slicks, like people were beginning to learn something, though still they were hindered a little bit because there were puddles all throughout the course. What's Chip Ganassi think about it, Nick?
Well, that's the big question. Is I didn't see many of your cars out there that practice session. What's the thought process, the game plan there in this session?
We didn't know how much we were going to learn there. 3 seconds off the pace, so we decided to wait and see. Hopefully we'll get some time in tomorrow. We'll be fine.
Pretty pleased with how the cars ran this morning, though?
They ran pretty good this morning. We're pretty happy with them, yeah.
The top 2 spots with Scott Dixon and Tony Kanaan, and 4 in the top 11. That was this morning, though, Paul Page.
Well, we'll run down the numbers for you now since everybody has made it back to the pits answering the checkered flag. It is Power that is number 1, followed by Ryan Hunter-Reay, then Simon Pagenaud, and then Stefano Coletti, then Di Silvestro. Montoya is 6, followed by Munoz. Kimball, who you mentioned earlier, Mark, has gotten on the chart in 8th now, followed by Takuma Sato and then Graham Rahal. That's your top 10. 11th is Hawksworth, followed by Marco Andretti, Elio Castroneves, James Jakes, James Hinchcliffe, Luca Felipe, and Gabby Chavez. That takes you through 17th. Bourdais is 18th, and then those are the cars that actually had times taken on the track. Karam, Dixon, Kanaan, Huertas, Draconi, and Newgarden did not show laps during that session.
Bourdais' lap actually was turned before that red flag, and you heard Chip Ganassi. Interesting that Kimball went out, was able to run in the top 10 speed-wise, but Chip Ganassi saying that we did